And hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show. So, anyway, today I am joined by Jack Breen to talk about his up and coming game, GigaSword.
Yes, hello everyone.
So, how about we'll start with an introduction of you.
So my name's Jack Breen. I've wanted to make games my whole life, but I've been actively making games for about 6 years now. I started when I was a junior in high school. I got started with Game Maker, and that's still what I use today. I've completed two games so far. I released a game called Jawbreaker in December of 2017. I think. I hope I'm correct on my own game. Um, and then I right before that, I also put out another game called Truck U, which was like an arcade top-down truck racing game where you have to try not to crash on the highway. And Jawbreaker was like a 2D fighting arcade game where you just had to beat as many enemies as you can. Um, so I've made other demos and stuff in between those games and since those games, and now I've moved on to GigaSword, which is an action puzzle Metroidvania where you have this ginormous sword that weighs you down. So GigaSword I started in the spring of 2019, and that's what I've been working on since.
Okay. And how did you first discover video games?
I just grew up with them. I have an older brother who's 6 years older than me. So growing up, we had a Nintendo, a Sega Genesis, and the PlayStation 1. And those three consoles were like kind of what I grew up around. So we had a lot of, Mario, Tomb Raider, Gran Turismo, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Ninja Turtles, just all the classics. I was indoctrinated to those at a very early age, so I just fell in love with them very early on.
Okay, and what would you say was your favorite game and or games growing up?
So one of my all-time favorites is Mega Man Legends on the PS1. Have you
Mm-hmm.
played that one?
I don't think so.
That one's easily one of my favorites. Lately, wait, is this talking about favorite games from my childhood or favorite games overall?
Your favorite games growing up?
Okay. Okay, so this is a GameCube game. Actually, a lot of them from my childhood are GameCube games, but Phantasy Star Online on the GameCube was one of my favorites. That still continues to be one of my biggest inspirations for art and for music. Um, Zelda, of course, like the Wind Waker, I loved as a kid. Mario Sunshine, I loved, still do. Um, Blaster Master is a game on the NES that still remains one of my favorites. So I love all the classics, but then there are a couple obscure ones like that still really appeal to me.
Okay, what would you say is your favorite game and or games now?
Dark Souls 3, I have to put on there. I know there's a lot of controversy around The Last of Us Part 2, but honestly, that game is probably like, in my opinion, one of the like top 10 best games I've ever played. I absolutely loved it. Um, what else would I have to put? Fast Draw Showdown is like the pinnacle of gaming. If you don't know what that is, you have to go look it up. So just forget about Mario and Zelda. If you look at Fast Draw Showdown, that is like what should be like at the top of the list when it comes to best video games of all time. So I encourage everybody that doesn't know what Fast Draw Showdown is to look that game up because that's a good one.
Okay. And so, if the world were not currently, like, having to deal with
Destroyed.
the fact that a plague is actually happening in our lifetimes, and, if such, at the time, like, at this time of recording, like, luxuries such as conventions could happen, we were at PAX or some other such similar convention and someone walked by your booth, what would be the elevator pitch you'd give them as to what Gigasword is?
So when we were at PAX, I was actually at PAX East in 2020, which was like a week before they shut everything down. That
Oh.
was like the last big event that was able to happen. And what we actually did was me and my older brother made a big foam GigaSword. We took like a Nerf sword and built like we gave it like a bigger blade out of craft foam and whatever. So like I would stand at the computer and my brother would stand and hold the sword and people would walk by and it would just be really eye catching. We'd be like, hey, do you want to like swing a huge sword around in a video game? And like that's kind of all it takes that tends to grab people's attention.
Okay. And where did the idea for GigaSword come from?
When I was in college, one of my best friends said that like he was like, "Oh, it would be cool to make a game just like a platformer where you had a huge sword, like a Buster sword," and uh, and he just kind of threw the idea out there, like it wasn't anything that he ever planned on pursuing or anything like that. It was just like something that he said, and immediately or almost immediately at least the idea for the mechanic came to mind, like that you would have to set the sword down because it would keep you from jumping high enough to reach certain things, and then you could set it down anywhere and you could set it on like platforms and then crank the platforms around the room to move it. Like all of that honestly came to mind pretty immediately, and this was back in like 2016. I wrote the idea down, and but it was only, like I said, it was only, I think I did actually make an early tech demo in like maybe 2017 or 2018, and I set it aside. But then, yeah, like I said, it wasn't until I made other stuff since then, and then it wasn't until like March of 2019 that I picked it back up, and I was like, I do still want to do something with this. And GigaSword was always the title, like it was Project GigaSword at first, but I just stuck with the name and I stuck with the mechanic, and it evolved from there. But the image, the core of what it is, has pretty much always been the same.
Okay. And this is the first thing I noticed when I saw you tweeting about it. So like Jack, why sword big?
Sword big because sword have to be so big. Well, so there is actually a lore reason. You get the sword, so the story has to do with how there are humans, and then there's a race called the Nocturne, and the Nocturne are like these giant owl people. They're like 9 feet tall, 8 feet tall, whatever. So all of their weapons are bigger, and you play as a kid named Ezra, and he's friends with a Nocturne. Um, and in the beginning of the game, something goes wrong. There's a battle that happens. Your friend, the Nocturne, is hurt in the battle, and you go to his aid, and he gives you his sword, and that's the Giga sword. So that's why it's so big, is because it's his weapon, but you're a human trying to wield it.
Okay. So I take it just from seeing the various gifs and tweets about the game that the fact that sword big is like going to be like key mechanic in the game once it's out.
Yeah, so there's a couple different areas in the game. It is, like I said, it's a Metroidvania. So if you play the demo right now, it leads you through like this forest area called the Outskirts. And so the majority of the game takes place in this big tower. It's like a big, castle tower. That's like where everything takes place, but the tutorial is like you're running to the tower. And so that forest on the outskirts acts as like the tutorial section, where you just kind of learn what you're doing and everything. And then once, and this is included in the demo, once you get inside, you're in the first area, which is known as the monastery. And the main mechanic in here is like these blocks that you can stab the sword into and then push around. um, so it's basically, it takes like the classic push block mechanic that's been in like every Zelda style game, but it just kind of, the twist is that you need the sword to move them around. So there are moments where you have to like push the thing onto like a switch to hold open a door, or you have to push it onto a platform and then crank it up so that you can jump on the block and get higher up. So that's like the main mechanic that people are seeing in the demo that's out. But later on, there are other areas. There's like a water area, and there's an area where there's a thunderstorm going on, and there are different mechanics that include the sword, that are based around those kind of elements and things.
Okay. And was having the game be a Metroidvania, was that always like the idea, or like while you were working on it, you figured like this type of game would work better as a Metroidvania?
I think it was always my idea. I just love Metroidvanias, so I think that this concept could have worked in other settings, but I think I just kind of gradually, um, or I should say, I naturally tend to gravitate towards making things Metroidvania style.
Okay. And like from the time you first had the idea to like roughly like the time when you imagine it'll be complete, how long will the games like have taken to go from like idea to finished product?
I'm hoping that see it's tough for me to put like a release date on the game because what I want to do now is I'm trying to get a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So and I know that that takes like there's a lot of legal stuff that goes on with that, and I have no idea how long that might take. Um, so if it was just down to like how much longer do I need to develop the game, I would probably say mm, it's so tough because like part of me wants to say like a year, but I've also been learning that I can work pretty fast. Like things have been moving quickly. I've learned because I had the crunch for PAX and because I had the crunch for Boston Fig, I've learned that like I can get quite a bit done in the span of like 2 months. And I really, yeah, so I really don't know. I would love for GigaSword to come out at like the end of 2021. It might be a bit later than that. It could be earlier. I really have no idea. But I'm probably like 50% of the way through development. So yeah.
Okay. And what would you say so far has been the most difficult part of the game's development?
Believe it or not, making those blocks cooperate when they're on like an elevator platform was like a nightmare. Like that's like I'm not even gonna get down to like hard about design or hard about like the like which sprite was the hardest to draw. Like just programming those stupid blocks to go up and down when you move an elevator up and down is like that was way harder than it had any right to be. I think just because of the way that the physics work in my game, which is that there are no physics. Every bit of physics has to be, hard coded by me because I'm not working in a physics engine or anything. So like, if the block is going to move while it's on an elevator, I have to specifically tell it to, and I've got to design exactly how it goes about that. So that was something I was working on early in December, getting the demo ready, and for some reason that was like one of the hardest things I've had to overcome for the project. But other than that. Um, I mean, this GigaSword as a whole has been going really well, I think, because I finally chose a project that I could handle. Like before GigaSword, I was always trying to make things that were like procedurally generated or had a bunch of enemies or like whatever. Um, and I was learning a lot along the way, but I was always choosing projects, and I think everybody does this when they're starting out. I was always choosing projects that I just couldn't really handle. But Gigasword, like the scope of it has I've done a good job of keeping the scope in check the whole time, and yeah, I think it's been pretty manageable. Like I everything that I've had to do for it, I've felt pretty confident about doing, and it's been a blast to just be working on it. It's just great to it's just great to work on every day.
Uh, okay. And do you think that once Gigasword is out and purchasable, do you think like you'll still continue to like dabble in the Metroidvania genre like down the line?
Oh, for sure. I'm sure I'll be back at some point, and I just love that genre so much. I'm always going to be coming up with new ideas for it, whether it's a sequel to Gigasword or something completely different. I have no plans right now. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but yeah, I'd love to make more.
Okay. And without like giving anything major away, is just like the titular GigaSword. Is that gonna be the chief do things mechanic in the game, or are you gonna? Will the character acquire various types of gear as the game progresses?
Yeah, so you unlock different abilities as you go on that allow you to access the different areas. So in the demo, what people see is that you get there are like these green doors. They're called emerald doors that you can't open, um, and then you just end up finding something called the emerald key, and with that, you're able to open any of the green doors that you come across. That's kind of a that's a very simple ability, but later on it gets more it gets similar to Metroid in which you're gaining new ways to actually move around and gaining new ways to like get up to certain areas that you couldn't jump up to before. And I won't spoil any of them, but yeah, you do unlock upgrades and things like that.
Um, okay. And is there any sort of advice you have for any like aspiring developers out there who might wish to make a thing of their own, like you have been with GigaSword?
Um, my advice would just be just make what you want. Just everybody says to start small, but like, you know what? Like, if you want to make something big, go big and see how far you get because you'll still learn something from trying to make it. That's what I did. I like I said before, I was always trying to make like these full-sized Zelda games or like these like procedurally generated like Enter the Gungeon style games, and like it was way out of my wheelhouse at that time. I was like 3 years into programming and had no idea what I was doing, and I arguably still don't really know much about what I'm doing, but I at least know more, and it's because of what I was trying to do before. I was always trying to make these things that were you know big and lofty, and so I was pushing my limits to the max every time, and that's how you learn. So and it's great to make small projects too. I encourage people to do that. Like some people say like start with Pong. I think that's way too boring, but like you will learn from that. So go for it and just start making things. And when it comes time that you really want to commit yourself to a project, just keep scope in mind. Like don't maybe don't plan on making like you know something with like think about what you're gonna have to do for it. Like if there's some crazy system down the road that like you're not gonna know how to program, like try doing it now and learning it now instead of like waiting until everybody knows about your game before you find out that this other thing that you were supposed to program for it isn't going to be possible. So a decent amount of planning is definitely important, but overall the best way to learn is to just start making stuff and see what happens.
Okay. And now for the final question of the interview, which all past guests have always understood perfectly. Jack, in your opinion, is video games?
Oh, video games sure is.
Yeah, and there you have it. And with that, we can come to the conclusion of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Coptercast. I would like to thank Jack Breen for making an appearance and talking about the game he's plugging away on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And for anybody that's listening that is interested in GigaSword, if you look up the game right now on itch.io, there is a free demo that's out where you can play it and swing a ginormous sword around.
Okay. And if any of the people watching at home enjoyed this, you can do like the regular things like, rate, comment, subscribe, and all of that. And if for some reason you want to give me a money for doing this thing, what I do, you can go to patreon.com/slash the pumpkincoptercast, where for as little as $1 a month, you can submit questions for me to use in future interviews. And Jack, is there anything you want to plug before we sign off?
Yeah, if anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, which is where I post most of my updates about game dev and everything else, that would be at hybrid underscore games underscore. So there's two underscores in there. Um, and if you want to see me dressed up as a banana and smash things with a baseball bat and talk about video games, that is on my YouTube channel, Hybrid Plays, where I play indie games, I teach about their design, I talk about what makes them tick, and I occasionally dress up in a fruit costume and like throw a scooter through a glass table or something like that. That's what I've been doing lately. So I don't know. Fans of like Adult Swim comedy will feel right at home. So go ahead and subscribe to Hybrid Plays. Come over to the channel, comment, show it to your friends, show it to your mom, show it to your priest. Do whatever you got to do. So yeah.
Okay. And you heard it here. And, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast. And as I say at the end of every show, have a gourd day, everyone.